So Searching for Jimmy Page follows 18-year-old Luna Kane as she journeys from her family's farm in eastern North Carolina to England in the winter of 1988 to solve the mystery her free-spirited dead mother, Claudia, set in motion when Luna was a child. Is Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page her father? At its heart, the novel is really about grief and mother-daughter relationships and using myth and art to create our own personal narratives. So I'm going to read the first chapter. It's really short because we want to move on to Cheryl, because we're here to celebrate the launch of her debut novel. Well, not the launch, but the release of her debut novel. So I'm just going to read the first chapter and we will move on to Cheryl. In fact, I think I'm just going to read this. It's easier to see. Chapter 1. The night my great-grandfather died, frigid air howled through the pines and swirled down the chimney of his shack near our fallow tobacco fields in eastern North Carolina. My grandmother and I kept vigil at his bedside, a battery-operated space heater oscillating at our feet, kerosene lamps lofting shadows on the walls. He'd refused to install electricity and insisted the fireplace remain unlit at night. He claimed spirits talked to him through the flue at the witching hour. So did birds, especially owls. He said they were good omens, unless they flew inside your house. Owl in the house means death's coming, he'd say. I lolled my head against the wall, bare like all the others. No family portraits or prosaic artwork or thumbtacked greeting cards with snapshots of my great-grandfather's progeny tucked inside. The shack was cluttered with clothes and other debris from a fading life, but the walls were naked. He preferred it that way. No memories or illusions, except the ones that came to him at night. At the stroke of 12, he wrapped his knotty fingers around my wrist and squeezed. Can you hear it? He asked, his voice like winter wind crackling through kindling. An icy shiver ran through me. He had not spoken since that balmy summer night when I was 9 years old, when the river ran dry and the pines began to cry, the night my mother committed suicide. An abomination, he'd called it, a sin against Providence. He'd sat expressionless in his rocking chair while Grandma delivered the news, his face bathed in candlelight, then hobbled into the woods and chanted my mother's name, like an incantation, a prayer for deliverance. Then he'd spoken no more. I inched closer to him, close enough to smell the implacable stench of the dying. Hear what? I asked timorously. Owls, he said, like music. My body fluttered, as if I were falling out of oblivion, slowly, unwittingly, the air prickly and thin. Long ago, I'd heard a song about owls crying in the night, the singer's wail primeval, in sync with marauding guitar licks that beat like jungle drums. I felt them vibrating inside me just then, like a distant echo from another life, one that still included my mother. Can you hear the music? He persisted, struggling to raise his head. Grandma implored me with her eyes. I can hear it, Granddaddy. He gave a shuddering laugh. Ain't in your head, girl. Where then? I waited, watching his chest rise and fall, his fitful breast grow shallow, the caesura between life and death. It's in your soul, he finally said. He nudged his Bible beside him, giving voice to verse. Ecclesiastes 6:10, that which hath been is named already. He dropped my arm and exhaled, his face pallid and drawn. Grandma and I stood over him, bearing witness, sleep pelting the windows, that song about the owls, its searing guitar haunting me, like fragments of memory I'd buried with my childhood. Grainy images of my mother in her yellow bedroom with her lavender incense and votive candles, her black and white photograph of a rock star standing on a stage at Kezar Stadium in 1973, dressed all in white, lips pursed, unruly dark hair framing a beatific face, guitar strapped over his shoulder, arms spread wide as if he were awaiting crucifixion. The two of them were intertwined in my mind's eye, like ashes wafting in a summer wind, waiting for water to receive them. I was born of water and moonlight, and of her, and of him. Grandma stopped the clock on the mantel to mark the moment of my great-grandfather's passing, as if halting time held power, then forever now. She handed me a flashlight, then draped her overcoat around me, the scent of Jergens lotion and talcum powder lingering in the fabric. "Go on home, honey," she said. "I shouldn't have brought you here." "You didn't," I said faintly. I followed her from our farmhouse at dusk, trudged the quarter-mile past the barn and hog pen, through the woods where the footpath ended, as if I'd heard my great-grandfather's keening call. "Go home," Grandma said, prodding me toward the door. "I'll be along directly." I wrenched away from her and stared at my great-grandfather, the withered shell that remained, searching for some part of him that still looked vital. The outline of his body beneath the quilt, legs splayed as if the cat he used to own were nestled between them, his arm dangling over the side of the bed. Grandma tucked it underneath the quilt her mother had made, tattered and yellowed with age, the same quilt that had covered her while she lay dying over half a century before, cancer ravaging her breast, flies swarming the window screens, attracted by the fetor of rotting flesh, all because her husband had believed he could heal her with ritual and prayer. I harbor a picture of that night in my mind's eye, my great-grandmother's bewildered stare, her mouth a perfect O, a last word half spoken, an oracle undelivered. Now he was dead, his jaw unhinged, spittle on his grizzled chin, his only child by his side, the daughter whom he only recognized after she'd tell him her name, the name he'd given her 70 years ago. "Do like I say," Grandma said sternly. I stood there breathless, my great-grandfather's milky eyes, fixed and dilated, seeing nothing, seeing everything, boring into mine. Grandma cupped my chin in her hand. "Don't look back," she said with urgency in her voice. I never had before, not after my mother died. Like my great-grandfather, I had not spoken her name since. I had not heard her voice in a brooding summer rain, or felt her hand clasping mine in a sibylline dream, or seen her face in the shadow of a stealthy hunter's moon. I had erased her, and the sainted sinner who conjured music and magic from an electric guitar, his photograph in my mother's bedroom, her unfaithful talisman. I'd never look back, never, until that winter's night in February 1988, when I was 18 years old. The past summoned like fire in my great-grandfather's shack, phantom owls crying in the night. It was inevitable. Perhaps it was even Providence. Now would return me to then. The tale demanded to be told. And Cheryl, the moment we've all been waiting for. Take it away. I'm just so thrilled to be here to help you.
A little dark.
Help you bring this book into the world. And we're two Livingston Press writers here, so that makes it extra special. So I know you're going to read chapter 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so thanks to Christy and Stephanie Jones-Byrne for having this event. I'm thrilled to be here. And thanks for all of you for coming out tonight, including my students from Borough of Manhattan Community College. So this novel, Off the Yoga Mat, is about 3 characters turning 40 in the year 1999. And it explores jealousy, bends of the body, and the courage to confront traumatic memory. It's told in alternating chapters by Nate, Lulu, and Nora. And I'm going to read the first Lulu chapter, which is chapter 2, and it's called Seva. There may have been a connection between the yoga triangles Lulu Betancourt demonstrated and her tendency to form love triangles. She had reveled in her share of risque encounters with men and women in the past decade. Now, Lulu thought, a brand new year leading to the millennium. Slow down. She'd missed meaningful coupling, enduring love. Of her many relationships, including a brief marriage to Wendell, none had stuck. She visualized herself in a playful dance with one who twirled her, pressed her close. She could shimmy out of that person's grasp without breaking eye contact, solo and yet mutual. Then it would be her lover's turn to shine, a complete being, all alone. She refused to dwell on recurring nightmares of a stout, bald man taunting her in childhood. Lulu walked from her apartment on Avenue A and 12th Street to 2 Squared, her studio in a red brick building on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street. In New York City, of course. Teaching and assisting others in a trial hatha yoga class created a space to breathe out her nightmare. That man had known her mother in New Orleans when she was little, after her dad left. Lulu stared at the assortment of men and women in the room. They had all shown up to check out a free sample class. She went easy, asked them to do a few standing poses. Then she worked on their cores, backs pressed into their mats. The chanting afterwards proved cathartic. The students, moved by harmonic vibrations, sounded like a string quartet in a glade of trees. The tone of voices in unison, low and deep, formed a protective shield around Lulu. After folks cleared out, a guy named Jesse from the health food store stopped by. She forgot she had invited him over. They made small talk. Then he lifted her, kissing her non-tattooed shoulder. His lips on her skin tickled. She expressed pleasure through non-Sanskrit chants and sighs. Lulu seldom planned such liaisons, but sex and yoga were mutual portals to her soul, the equipment in her playground. As Jessie spoke her name, Lulu thought, this feels rushed. It's not what I want. She heard the door to the vestibule open with a rattle outside the yoga room. Who was there? Hello, a deep voice echoed. Excuse me. She wriggled out of Jessie's embrace and adjusted her clothes. Just a minute, she shouted. She walked into the small entrance. She squinted through the dimness and recognized the tall, striking guy with unkempt, dark hair, his pallor set off by facial stubble. He must have overheard giggles and kisses, might have glimpsed a quick embrace. Sorry I barged in, he said, offering his hand. I'm Nate Dart. Sorry to disturb whatever. I took your trial class. Forgot my backpack. Can I take a look? He walked through the studio door without waiting for her answer. Then he reappeared. Got it. He was about to scoot away. Wait a second, Nate, Lulu said. I am curious. What brought you to my class? He paused. For starters, I've got lower back pain, and I can't seem to write my thesis. His stomach growled. He rubbed his midsection. I've decided to try this yoga thing. She noted wide dark eyes, long hair, tapered fingers. He was impossible to forget, wearing jeans in class, barely crossing his legs and trying to duck out. Then he snored in bursts of intensity during savasana. Sorry to hear you're in pain. She pulled down her shirt. If you saw or heard anything out of the ordinary, it's not in the curriculum. That's for the advanced class, he said, deadpan. She laughed and whirled around, handed him a pocket-sized schedule. Yoga has great potential to release stress and increase calm, help you to cast off your demons. Everyone goes at their own pace. Come back. Don't let others in the class distract you. I know about distractions, Nate said. I tend to avoid. Don't avoid me. A powerful gust of wind blasted up the steps from outside through the doorway. She folded her arms and shivered. I'll close the door on my way out, he said. He flashed a crooked smile before turning his back to her. This Nate, scruffy, cool as a cucumber. In class, she had helped him to his knees into child's pose. She showed him how to form a spinal twist. He seemed embarrassed. You've made me bend, he said. I thought it was impossible. She noted dark circles beneath his eyes, a dimpled chin. What was he writing about? Probably something unsavory. After locking the studio door, Lulu found it impossible to focus on Jessie. I'm not into it, she said, and led Jessie to her tiny office where they drank hot water over tea leaves. After he left, Lulu, exhausted, stacked the stray mats and rounded up cushions and yoga blocks. Next, she concentrated on steady three-part breathing, then gathered her things to go. She locked the door of the outer vestibule behind her and meandered down the long flight of steps. Outside, she merged into the chaos of the East Village. A car blasted its staccato horn. A man rode a bike past her on the sidewalk, nearly grazing her toes. Someone yelled, "Motherfucker." Off to the side of the building, a tall, skinny man with a mustache stood puffing on a cigarette. "Ms. Betancourt, glad I caught you," he said, exhaling. "Didn't you receive the notices? I'm from the building manager's office." It must have been those letters on behalf of the ginormous university. Why wouldn't they let her be? Do they have to keep migrating, taking over the West Village and now the East? Some kind of educational manifest destiny? "You've got 30 days, he said. The university is buying the building. Everyone out." "I need time," Lulu said, composed. "I run a successful business." "Don't we all?" he said. "Fill out the papers, agree to vacate. I have a feeling you can negotiate. See some cash. It's a win-win." "I have to go," she said, breaking away. She'd look them over later, maybe get some advice. No way would she let them toss her out. She had shoved earlier notices into a drawer. As she walked north, a group of men and women climbed into and out of a dumpster in front of a supermarket. Others sat at the nearest stoop, sorting through fruits, vegetables, and prepared cakes. The participants, known as freegans, were mostly white, children of the middle class. Lulu had passed them many times before. She found their behavior perplexing. Why frolic in garbage to make a point? She preferred charity behind the scenes and to give back to women and communities of color. Those freegans, privileged grandstanding. Her recent New Year's resolution focused on yoga, away from the mat. Seva, a term used by her teachers in the ashram to indicate a spiritual presence directed to those in dire need. She considered developing a yoga class for distressed and angry children, kids who'd likely dismiss the practice, but unwittingly find grace through it. Kids in the housing projects nearby who never had access to yoga. As an angry, frightened child, racially mixed at a time it was rarely discussed, she could never be sure of peace. Her mother, Rosa, discovered yoga by following the moves of a TV guru. Her lion posture cracked up Lulu as a child. On all fours, her mother stuck out her tongue and then roared. It marked a time before their lives spiraled away. The freegan leader shouted into a megaphone on the middle of 2nd Avenue. "Who will join us? So much food in New York City is wasted while others go hungry. The world isn't going to end in the year 2000, but what if we could end hunger?" Lulu stared at the scraggly dumpster divers. She planned to volunteer at the Bowery Mission or a nearby soup kitchen. So much begging on the sidewalks, ragged folks of all ages strewn across alleys and in Tompkins Square Park, runaway kids addicted to something and needing help they wouldn't ask for. Could she ever find compassion for herself in this desolation? What if she was forced to relocate, thrown out of the humble studio she had built from nothing? She'd go back to zero. A term from Buddhism gave her perspective. In the readiness of time, embrace the one. Nightmares disrupted her days, but relief came from consulting the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, cryptic aphorisms by a yogi alive in the 2nd century. She told herself to live in the now and here, even as she recalled dreaded fragments of her past. Sometimes she could not recognize the false from true or find a plausible answer. She'd get to the bottom of her nightmares while serving those who needed it the most. Let go of judging everyone, even myself, Lulu thought. Pedestrians sidestepped the ragtag freegans clogging a patch of 2nd Avenue as if their freshness had long passed its expiration date. She dropped a $5 bill into the donation basket and prayed for patience and resolution. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Cheryl. What a great chapter. And I was just in New York, as you know. So I love all the New York City references. And I love the yoga and sex connection that comes out in that chapter. So to kick off our conversation, I'll ask the most obvious question. The novel is called Off the Yoga Mat. So yoga is part of the story. One of the three main characters, Lulu, that we just met, is a yoga instructor. She says in one of her classes, as you read just a few minutes ago, we must not forget to practice yoga off the mat, which is where the novel gets its title. So what does Lulu mean by that?
And it's called seva. So it's the good you do when you're not on the yoga mat, because in the Western tradition, we've kind of emphasized the body and the yoga pants and all that.
Yeah,
And
the yoga butt.
yes, so that's like the materialist aspect of yoga, but now this takes place in 1999, and Lulu's already been, Lulu's about to turn 40. She's 39, and she's already been doing yoga most of her life. So she sees the spiritual part of yoga, the part of yoga that's not only about the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to emphasize that, and then, as you know, the Nate, one of the other main characters, who's mentioned, of course, in that chapter, he's not a yoga guy. He comes in jeans and he falls asleep and snores, but he becomes a yoga guy.
Mm-hmm.
So the other off the mat is the fact of how what we do in our life, what we regret from our past, how we can have a second chance, how we can reshape, if you want to take a metaphor, how we can reshape our lives as we are approaching 40, which, now seems young, right? But it seems like it's a big moment in a person's life, I think. So
what is your experience with yoga?
Okay, thanks for asking. So like I just said there, my mother did yoga with a television yogi. She'd be doing funny postures on the floor when I was a little kid, and I found it hilarious. And just on and off over the years, I've always been drawn to yoga, but I've never had the discipline to have a regular practice. So I have irregular practice. And my sister is now a yoga teacher. So she sort of, but she went for that in middle age. She started out working for IBM, and she went into the wellness field and, became a yoga teacher. And so it's something I like. I'm drawn to it, but I'm not very good at I'm kind of awkward, or I'm kind of inflexible in certain areas. What's really interesting in yoga is, so I can touch my toes, no problem. Nate can't touch his toes.
Right.
Like my son can't touch his toes, but then he can do other moves that I can't do. So all of our bodies are so different, and what we can and can't do is so interesting. But the more you do it, the more flexible you become.
Okay. Have you had an enigmatic yoga teacher like Lulu in your own experience?
Oh, thank you for asking. I've had amazing teachers and I've had bad teachers. So, but some of the instructions that Lulu gives, like the funny ones, like where she says, imagining you're cleaning out a jar of peanut butter, tighten the butt and imagine you're cleaning. That actually came from a yoga teacher whose class I went to. So I would hear some funny and interesting metaphors, and being a writer and being a poet, I'm always drawn to metaphors.
Right.
So some of the stuff in the novel comes from actual classes I've taken, but a lot of it came from my research as well.
Okay. So a big part of the novel revolves around turning 40, as we just mentioned, and dealing with personal baggage amidst the Y2K craze. And I remember that very well. I think I have a friend who stockpiled salt. He may still have salt that he stockpiled during that time. It was just nuts. So the characters are dealing with this kind of personal issues during this crazy time. Nate is dealing with the idea of jealousy and his unfinished PhD dissertation, and Lulu is dealing with childhood trauma. And Nora, the third main character, is dealing with this extreme desire to become a parent. She wants to have a baby. Why did you choose that time period and that particular age?
Great question. So as many of you know, and as was read in my introduction by Stephanie, I live very close to ground zero from 9/11, World Trade Center. And I wanted to set the novel before 9/11. I just, because I felt like if I set it anytime after 9/11, my characters would have had to deal with with the fall of 9/11. So, and then I did remember the Y2K craze, which now looking back, it seems kind of quaint that we were so worried about time, what would happen to time, and would all computers get wiped out and crash. And we were just so caught up in the frenzy. It was also the millennium, a new millennium. And so this novel kind of looks at the way the approaching new millennium affects people's feelings about things and their fears and their anxieties. So I just thought it was a fertile time. Plus, it turns out it was the year of the Columbine high school shooting.
Yeah.
Which I reference in the novel.
Yes, I was just going to say that. You referenced that in the book.
And that was like, unfortunately, we keep having more of those horrible shootings, but that was a big watershed moment in our country. And Nora happens to be in Finland when that happens, but that's like a moment when she sort of feels homesick in a way for And you know what else happened that year? That was the year of Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. So many things happened that year. And I couldn't put them all in, but I found a way to work in some of the historical moments that seemed really key in that year. And then, of course, the musical aspect of Prince of 1999 and that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah. So I've never read a novel that centers around Y2K, and it really took me back. And I mean, and that those fears were sort of legitimate because we didn't know what was going to happen with computers. We didn't know what was going to happen with, a lot of different aspects of daily life even. So that kind of craze was very real at the time. And you brought it back to life so well in the book. It is an issue for all of them, but particularly Nora.
Yeah.
So, and I want to come back to her. But there's a lot about academia in the book that I found compelling. And this has to do with Nate's storyline. You and I are both in academia. We both teach. And so I know I can relate to some of what happens in that area. And I bet you can too. So talk about how convoluted the academic experience and world are for Nate. And what are his goals and desires in that area?
So Nate is 39 and he's been in graduate school at least 8 years. So he's stuck. He doesn't have a job. He's got loans. He's got lots of debt, like so many people do. And he wants to be a teacher. He really wants to. He has a desire, to teach students and to help students go through their struggles. But he has a dissertation director that blocks his thesis, which is very common in graduate school, unfortunately. So he has Offendorf. Offendorf doesn't like, Nate's focus is on jealousy. He's jealousy, but he's studying it through Shakespeare and also through Darwin. He's claiming that jealousy is an evolutionary trait, which is kind of a very strange theory. And his advisor doesn't really like it and is trying to say, take that out. And Nate doesn't know what to do. So he goes to his friend from graduate school, Monica, who I won't talk a lot about her. She's a minor character, but she's someone who succeeded in academia very well and tries to help him. But I think, those of us, whether we're undergraduates like my students or graduate students, there can always be some people in academia that just are not very helpful.
Yeah.
There's some that help you and are wonderful and guide you and try to wake you up to your own potential. And then there are just crazy rules in academia, hoops you have to jump through. And especially in graduate school, you're trying to get this credential and you're treated like a child. So in a way, graduate school infantilizes you. I felt that when I was in graduate school. And Nate feels that really, and it stops him. He won't have a baby with Nora because he has no money. He doesn't feel ready. So she breaks up with him at the beginning because she's a woman. She can't wait. She wants to have a child now, and he doesn't want to. He's not ready. So that's kind of a watershed moment for those two people. But as you know, Christy, some things happen for Nate, good and bad.
Yes.
That get him out of where he was. That kind of and being in yoga kind of is helpful to him because he's getting out of his head and he's getting a little bit more into his body.
Right.
So.
Well, where did you come up with the idea for his dissertation?
It just came to me. Well, I mentioned jealousy because I think we all feel jealous, and when you're a student, when you're in a competitive field like education and going for a PhD, you're very aware of being competitive with other students. The teachers in graduate school seem to pick favorites sometimes. And then I just think that if you want a relationship and you're not in a relationship and you're turning 40, you're kind of nervous. Am I ever going to find anybody? That's Nora, right? Not only does she want to have a baby, but she wants to have a partner.
Sure.
Lulu, as you could hear, Lulu's had a lot of relationships, but mainly they didn't last long. They were short, and she also wants something more meaningful in her life. So jealousy, I think, is just, it's kind of a strange topic to do a dissertation on. But I wanted it to be different. I wanted to come up with a topic that was kind of funny, because humor is important to me. And this book has, I hope, people find a lot of humor in certain aspects of this book.
But he's struggling with jealousy on a personal level too. And I won't say too much about that, but he is encouraged to kind of deal with the dissertation on a much more visceral, personal level. And that kind of makes the whole experience of getting that work done even more interesting. And I mean, again, I'm not going to say anything more about it, but you guys out there in YouTube land need to read the book, and it's very interesting how that is handled.
Well, right. It drives the plot of the novel.
Yeah.
Actually, they have to try to make Nate jealous.
Right.
So you really feel jealousy instead of just having it be intellectual.
Yes.
Go through it. And he claims he never does get jealous, but of course, that's a silly claim, right?
So both your novel and mine involve international travel. In Searching for Jimmy Page, Luna travels to the UK to look for Jimmy Page. And off the yoga mat, Nora's job sends her to Finland to work for a few months. So what were some challenges you faced in writing about another country and culture?
Well, there were a lot of challenges, but luckily for me, I was a Fulbright professor in Finland, and I lived there for 6 months, and I loved it. And my son went to 2nd grade in Finland, and I came back many times since then. And I wanted this novel in a way to be a celebration of Finnish culture and my respect and admiration for it. Plus, when you are an outsider, you see things that the local people don't see.
Exactly.
So that's what I was trying. Like when Nora gets to Helsinki and she goes, she sees the names of the streets and she doesn't even look at anything else because she's so caught up in the long Finnish names of streets. And and I noticed, how come there's so many hair salons? I would say to people, why are there so many hair salons and sex shops?
Wow.
I noticed that. And they were like, what are you talking about? I don't know. We don't have that. And I'm like, yes, you do. So I think one of the things about being an outsider is just you notice things that people don't notice. And when a Finnish friend came to visit me, she noticed the parking lots in New York City where the cars are raised up, where it's a small parking lot and they have these like conveyor belts that move cars up to like a high level. I never noticed those, but she's like, wow, you have these cool parking lots where you raise up cars on machines. And so I think, one of the wonderful things about travel, and I recommend it to anyone who can do it, is it just expands you. It just expands you in every way. And so I take a lot of pleasure in sharing the Finnish history, Finnish culture, Finnish food, the Sami, which is my academic research on the indigenous Sami people. I've done a lot of environment.
Well, that comes out in the novel too.
Yeah, so like I wanted to put it in there, but the difference between academic research and fiction is you don't want too much research in fiction. You want to use your imagination.
Yes. So last year you published a book of poems and photographs celebrating Finnish sauna, or as we're told in the novel, is pronounced Sauna?
No, sauna.
Sauna. Okay. Well, the book that you published is called this. I'm just going to stick with sauna because I'm trying to remember.
Well, that's how Americans say it.
Yes, the sauna is full of maids. So you published this book celebrating that culture, that sauna culture, that Finnish sauna culture. So you have this long running affair with this, and it's prevalent and off the yoga mat. So tell us a little bit about that culture and how Nora becomes involved in it.
Okay. So Nora is an American. She works in a corporate job in New York in a cubicle, and her boss is kind of sexually harassing her. And then she's in Finland, and it's such a different culture. the people that tend to be shy. It's a small population, but it's beautiful. And the sauna, people get naked together and sit together and sweat. So it's kind of, it kind of shocks her and surprises her. And she's very self-conscious about her body and feeling fat. But, naked people are sitting together, of course, separated by gender. So women are with women, men are with men, in mostly Finnish sauna culture. But so it helps Nora. It helps her to get over her self-consciousness and just accept herself. And she makes friends with a woman who is a larger woman, who's not shy about her body and who's accepting her body. And so in a way, the more accepting culture there of different types of bodies and different ages is healing for Nora. And she sees the sweat as getting out a lot of the poisons in her system or the toxins in her system. And I got really into sauna culture, and I really miss it because in the United States, we don't really know how to do it right.
Right.
So it's a whole subculture, and it's very spiritual. I would say if you know the sweat lodge, Native American sweat lodge, there's something in common with that. It's a purification. It's a way of purifying yourself, and also communicating. People take sauna together and maybe they're shy, but once they're naked, sitting next to each other, sweating, they somehow open up to each other.
Right. Well, I know we're getting close to the open Q&A, but I did want to slip this question in. So, I host a podcast on the convergence of fiction and music called Rock is Lit from Pantheon Podcast Network. So, of course, I have to ask you about the significance of music in the novel. You did this great playlist for Large Hearted Boy. And for folks out there who don't know what that is, it's this literature and music website that explores the overlap of the two art forms, and authors create and discuss playlists that relate to their books. So I'm going to throw out a song or two, since we do need to get to the open Q&A. I'm going to throw out a couple of songs you included in that list and have you give us some context for how they function in Off the Yoga Mat and what they mean to you personally. So the first one is You're a Big Girl Now by Bob Dylan.
So Nora has a crush on a Finnish guy named Jussi, who's a big Bob Dylan fan, who's kind of a fanatic, and she even says he's the Finnish Bob Dylan because he's mysterious and cryptic like Bob Dylan. And so You're a Big Girl Now is a song about you're a big girl. You can handle problems. You can handle heartbreak. And it happens at a moment when Nora sees this guy with someone else, and she's feeling really over her head in terms of her desire and it not being returned, unrequited crushes on people. And so a lot of what she experiences in Finland is she's trying to meet someone. She wants to have a baby. She always has in mind, though, that she could do donor insemination if it doesn't work out. But she's kind of a little desperate, I have to say. So and it's fun. It's fun to write a character it's not fun when it happens to you, when it happens to us. But when you're writing about it and you get your distance from it, it kind of interesting. But anyway, that's what that song is about. It plays at a moment when she's feeling that she should be a big girl, but she's not. She's not a big girl. She says I'm a big girl with a child's needs, or something like that is the line I have.
Do you remember the first time you heard that song?
I just have always loved that song.
Yeah.
The song gives me chills.
Yeah. So the first time I heard it was not on the album Blood on the Tracks. It was on Bob Dylan's box set Biograph. And it's a different version. It's an unreleased version. Yes. And so when I finally did hear it on Blood on the Tracks, I liked this is typical though. You like the original better than you like what you hear the next version. So I love that song.
I'd love to hear that version because I don't know that version. And Dylan is so weird. Like some of his songs I like covers better than his version.
Exactly. Yeah. But I love Dylan too. So I was thrilled to see Dylan take such a prominent role in the book. And I'm going to throw one more out there and then we'll go to the open Q&A. Let's Go Crazy. And heck, what 1999 too. 1999 is the obvious choice there because it is 1999 in the book. So let's talk about Prince.
Well, Prince is just such an inspiration and continues
Yes.
to be an inspiration to me. He's so creative. He's so talented. He's so genre and gender bending.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he enabled so many people to be who they are through him.
Yeah.
So what other artist can really convey the excitement? So when Nora and Nate meet up at that wedding, Let's Go Crazy is coming through the floor. And then 1999, of course, is referred to, but she said, we were dreaming when he wrote this.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of his line is, I was dreaming when I
Yeah.
wrote it. So I kind of mess around with it because a lot of the book is about dreams, and everybody has dream in the novel. I have everybody's actual nighttime dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Have these dreams, and just the whole sense of what's going to happen in the year 2000 was a little dreamlike, right? We didn't know it was going to happen. We thought time was going to somehow fall apart. We weren't going to know how to measure time anymore.
Right.
So I don't know. So just, I love Prince. I love
Prince too.
Yeah, so I just feel like his spirit, I want it in the book, and it continues to be a motivator for me.
Sure. I have many more questions. You're going to have to come on Rock is Lit so I can ask them.
I'd love to come on Rock is Lit. So awesome that you do.
But for now, I'm going to just turn everything back over to Stephanie and let her handle the Q&A.
Well, I was actually going to say that I typed in a reminder to the audience, and I'll go ahead and give a verbal reminder to the audience to ask questions because they've been slow with questions. So, Christy, if you have another one you'd like to ask at the ready while we're waiting for the audience, feel free.
Well, I can ask about more of the music because I'm interested in that. So, Cheryl, you want to talk about "I'm Waiting for the Man" by the Velvet Underground and Nico?
Well, that's not actually referenced, but that song to me is is such an East Village, Lou Reed.
Yes.
Waiting for the Man is about waiting for your drug dealer.
Yes.
So,
but it's in your Large Hearted Boy playlist.
It's in my Large Hearted Boy because I wanted a song that epitomized the beginning of the novel when it's set in the East Village of New York City. Mm-hmm. So that's what I came up with. I mean, there obviously could be lots of other songs, but that was the one for me that just felt like the spirit of what I'm trying to create in the novel.
So there's a lot of Finnish songs that I didn't recognize. Do you want to talk about some of those? And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce them.
Well, the Finnish polka. So, in the novel, there's scenes that take place in bars.
Yep.
And so there was a bar that I really liked. It was under the railroad tracks. And I mentioned that people sing karaoke because even though Finns are generally shy kind of people, once they start drinking and singing karaoke, they go crazy and they dance. I mean, so I loved the fact that while someone is up there singing karaoke, other people get up and dance. So I picked a polka, like a very spirited polka to symbolize like the exuberance of the dancing in the bar culture.
Right.
In Scandinavia, not only in Finland, but maybe in a lot of countries.
Yeah, I was grooving on all the karaoke. The karaoke parts were great.
Thank you. So, and Nora gets up and sings a karaoke.
Yes, she does.
Yeah.
So another song I'll throw out, just in case Stephanie doesn't have any questions yet.
We do have one now, but go ahead while you're on a roll.
Okay, I'll finish up the music thing and then we'll move on to that. So Whitney Houston's "I Want to Dance with Somebody." That comes at an important point. Yes. You want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Whitney Houston is sad,
Sure.
There's a lot of sad stuff that happened, but she's a brilliant artist. And so that's after, I don't want to say what happens, but it's after a key scene between Nate and Lulu, and he's reflecting on what just happened, and that song comes on while he's sort of moping in this cafe. And I want to dance with somebody and love somebody. It's a song about wanting to connect, and he's just kind of blown it. So,
and you can't help but bring that baggage that goes with Whitney Houston and what happened to her to that scene, and it adds to the poignancy of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then the other song, which was a Lordi, Hard Rock Hallelujah, they won Eurovision the year before I was in Finland for my Fulbright, and the whole country was obsessed. Americans are not don't really know about Eurovision. I do now, but I didn't at the time. And so I felt like I had to bring them in because it was such a big deal. The year I was there, it was such a big deal and they've never won it again since then. So that's like an international song competition for those of you who don't. And the songs are always silly and kitschy, and people wear weird costumes and do weird like explosive staging. You have to watch it, Christy. You would love it.
I've never seen it.
You've got to watch
I've got to watch it.
It's so unbelievable. And they made a movie about it that Will Ferrell was in. About
I'm watching it.
You got to watch it, and it's set in Iceland, and it's so funny because Will Ferrell plays like a young guy, and he's clearly not a young guy. So it's just so funny.
Is this recent?
Yes, it's within the last few years. I'm not coming up with the title. It might even have Eurovision in the title.
I think it does. I saw that film. I think it does have Eurovision in the title. I can't remember exactly either.
But anyone that watches, that watches America's Got Talent or The Voice or any of those song competitions, so Eurovision is something like that. The difference is, though, that the consumers all vote for who wins from their country first, and then one artist goes against people from all over the other countries, and you can't vote for the artist from your own country when it gets to the finals. Yeah.
All right.
So, Michael, I just want to say we are going to get to your question.
Go ahead.
I promise, but Cheryl, I just need to ask you, as someone who watched that Will Ferrell film about Eurovision, and you're someone who's, I've never seen the actual thing. I've never seen the real thing. So now I just have this overwhelming curiosity about how closely, because it was obviously a comedy and a bit of a satire.
No, but that's what Eurovision is.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Well, it's so much a satire of itself.
That's mind-blowing.
That's why you have to watch it. It is so hilarious, and people get so into it. It's just very, very funny.
So it's a plug for Eurovision from everybody.
Watch Eurovision.
I don't watch other competition shows because I have a low humiliation threshold, like for other people. Like seriously, watching shows like that for me is like how other people watch horror movies, right? Where I'm like this.
I just want to give you one.
I can't stand it when anybody embarrasses
Stephanie,
themselves.
you know how
publicly.
in the film Will Ferrell is in a wheel, like a hamster wheel?
Yeah.
That really happened. There was an act that really happened.
Get out, really?
On the stage.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it is so kitschy and so silly that it's just entertaining because of that. It's so over the top.
Okay, so I'm going to do my job as the book person now and get back to the book talk. But thank you for that that little digression about Eurovision. I think that's a valid recommendation for everybody who's watching. And then Michael has a question, which starts, the East Village yoga place reminded me of the one that used to get long lines of people standing on St. Mark's Place. This is obviously very specific. And was it inspired by that one?
I think he might be talking about Yoga for the People, possibly. There also was another one that was in like a basement of the church, and they were like, pay whatever you want. They were very egalitarian. So I worked on this book. I'd say I started it around 2009. Okay. So a lot of these places that have sprung up came after I already started the novel. So I didn't have any one place in mind when I created Lulu's Yoga Studio 2 Squared. I didn't really have a particular place in mind. It was just a place that I knew could have existed in the East Village. And in fact, there are many places. There are so many different yoga styles and types of yoga studios. But no, it wasn't modeled on any one in particular. But thank you.
It sounds like you tapped into something real, though, that people could identify with, which is great. So we have a question from Glenna, who says, lots of people dream about writing a novel. Was there a catalyst that pushed you to actually sit down and start writing it?
Well, Glenna knows me. So I've been a poet my whole life, and I've also been a fiction writer for a long time. But when I went to graduate school, I kind of put aside the fiction to do my PhD and write scholarly articles that are required if you want to get an academic job. But I always wanted to write fiction. And I wrote, when I look back at all my old notes, I've been writing short stories pretty much my whole life since I was even a kid. they weren't good. And when I got my MFA, it was actually in fiction, and I wrote short stories and a novella for that. So it just seemed like a natural progression, being that I read novels all the time, being that I read tons of novels. I love literary fiction, is my favorite kind of books to read. And being that, I've been writing my whole life, I just wanted to write a novel. But it took me a long time to get this to come together, being that I had 3 narrators, 3 different points of view is not an easy thing. And I did write an essay called Case Study, How I Published Off the Yoga Mat. And in there, I point out key like workshops, and I had someone who called himself a writing mentorship that helped me like with the pacing. So really, it took a lot of different collaborative moments to make it come together. It was a long haul. So, I'm glad it's finally out into the world, and I hope that people will enjoy it and find it entertaining and enlightening. But I guess I always wanted to write it, and I'm glad I did. And hopefully I can keep writing more, either novels, novellas, and more poetry books.
So that leads me into, I don't see any more audience questions yet, but I'd like to go ahead and slip in one of my own, because I'm always curious about writers' processes, and I bet there's a few people in the audience who are as well, and particularly when you write in multiple genres. So Cheryl, you write poetry, short stories, and novel-length fiction. Can you talk a little bit about what your writing process is, how you approach, and what your, if any, your discipline is, and how that might vary from style to style? And then Christy, if you would chime in as well, tell us a little bit about your writing.
Okay.
We'll start with you, Cheryl.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for poetry, poetry is shorter, and poetry, certain things like in the moment, and when like I have narrative elements in my poetry, but I also have abstraction in my poetry. I like abstract poetry. So when I know when something's a poem, because I don't really want to tell it as a straightforward narrative. I want to focus on the landscape. The Finnish, the book, the Sauna book focuses a lot on the language that I took from the Finnish epic, the Kalevala, which is an epic poem from there. So I like the sound, even though, it was in Finnish. I read the English translation. So like for me, poetry is more about sound. It's more about abstraction. It's more about a moment in time. Whereas fiction, whether it's flash fiction that I write, that's 1,000 words or under, or a long or short story, is driven by the need to tell a story and have something change. Basically, fiction is driven by something has to change. There's this situation, there's this tension, there's this conflict, and then something has to happen that causes a shift. So it's much more, I think, formulaic, even if it's experimental. There has to be some sort of movement. And I mean, poetry can have movement too, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to.
Getting back to your question, Stephanie, I don't know that I really have a process anymore. I mean, honestly, for the last several months, I've just been working on the podcast. So I haven't been able to do a whole lot of my own writing. But when I was writing Searching for Jimmy Page, and it was years in the making, it took a series of intense personal losses that kind of helped me. I needed to live through that in order to get to where I needed to be with the story. I mean, it took that kind of experience to get me in that place. So after my husband died in 2014, then it became this really regimented process of I'm up every morning at 5, and I would start out reading to get my creative juices flowing. And then it was get in front of the computer and write as long as you can until it's time to do schoolwork, because I teach. And I teach online at East Carolina University. So it was that balance of getting schoolwork done. But what I was doing was trying not to have too much time to kind of wallow in the grief. I needed the work. So like Luna, I used art to kind of heal myself or save myself. And that was my process for this book. Just get up at 5, read, start writing, and just keep going. And so it'll be interesting to see with a new book what that process looks like, because I'm in a very different place in my life right now.
Yeah. And it can certainly, I know from talking to various writers, sometimes it does look very different from book to book.
Yeah.
Because obviously you're living your human experience while you're doing this thing, and that's going to color whatever happens.
Sure.
And I feel like it can be so helpful for anybody who writes, and especially if they're just getting started, or if they're stuck, to hear from writers with just such a wide variety of experiences around how they come at writing and how they get the writing done, because it just varies widely, even beyond the sort of like, are you a pantser or are you a plotter? Like, there's just all of this stuff in between.
But I think healing is a big part of it. So
absolutely, yeah.
So in Christy's case, it's so obvious that it was healing for her and her character as well.
Yeah, there was a lot of overlap between what I was dealing with and what Luna was dealing with. The situation was different, but that underlying feeling of needing to heal was there with both of us.
So I think that's the great thing about writing. It's a way to work out whatever struggles, demons, mourning you have, but especially if you write fiction, you can make stuff up. So it's sort of why I don't want to write a memoir, because I like making stuff up, and I like going beyond just the personal stuff.
Well, and mine started out as a memoir. And then I realized that, this is a grief therapy tool and something that I needed to do, but it's not the work that I really know it could be. And Cheryl, I agree with you. I really started to have fun with it when I turned it into a novel, and I could just go in all these different directions and have these characters that I don't have any personal relationship with them, and really take control over that narrative.
Yeah.
Well, that's we're just past the top of the hour. And I didn't mean to cut you off there, Cheryl, because I am going to invite you both to share last words before we wrap up and say goodnight to the audience. We wanted to just start heading that way. And so Christy, we'll start with you, and then Shen will end with Cheryl for any last thoughts that you want to send folks home with this evening.
Sure. Go buy Cheryl's book. It's good. She's my fellow Livingston Press sister, and I'm just really thrilled that I could be here to do this event with you. And I'm doing the podcast called Rock is Lit. So if people out there are interested in rock novels, check that out. You can get it wherever you listen to podcasts. The audiobook of Searching for Jimmy Page is coming out very soon, and I'm excited about that. And beyond that, I'm just I'm here to cheer on Cheryl. So rah rah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. And Christy, thank you for those questions. I thought they were interesting, and I thought we had a good conversation. I found this fun to participate in, and I would appreciate your support. And if you do want to buy Off the Yoga Mat and Searching for Jimmy Page, buy it through Malaprops, please.
Yes.
Support independent bookstores, because they're really the bookstores that take chances on people and have wonderful events and bring in their communities. So please, that would be really great. And it's almost the holidays, so consider getting a book as a gift.
There you go.
Yes.
You're a bookseller at heart, Cheryl. I love it. Take two, they're small.
I mean, I love bookstores. I'm someone who like, I can't go in a bookstore because I don't want to, I don't have room for that many more books in my house.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
books.
it's pretty, yeah, it's a challenge.
Okay, so Stephanie, let's
Okay.
do this again
Thank you,
next year.
Stephanie.
I mean, we might as well. Just plan on it. It's October 27th every year.
Thank you so
One
much.
of you just needs to
Malaprops.
get working on a book. So that'll be out at that time. So you're most welcome. It's been lovely to see you both this evening and to hear from you. And I know from the chat, the audience has had a great time, and I'll make sure you see all of that after the fact as well.
How do we
And
see that?
I will send it to you.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And to everyone who's been with us this evening,
Yeah.
thank you so much for spending some time with us. We know that everybody has stuff to do. And so we really appreciate you
And to my
joining us
students,
live.
if you write a little report, you get 2 extra credit points.
There you go. That's a bonus for hanging out to the end, y'all. Bonus points for a little report on this event.
Plus, we didn't
Students,
have to talk about food justice for one night.
Although that is very important.
That's what we.
It's a whole other, yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you all
Thank you.
again so much for coming in this evening. We really appreciate it. And thank you again
Thank
to Cheryl J. Fish and Christy Alexander Hallberg. Their books are Off the Yoga Mat and Searching for Jimmy Page. Available at Malaprops and also at other independent bookstores.
You had pictures of the books right on the invitation.
We do, yeah. It's right on and we've got links in there for folks. And so we make it as easy as we can. If you're in Asheville, you can also just stop by. So
Absolutely.
we hope to see you soon. And Cheryl and Christy, you hang out. I'll see you when we're off the live stream, and everyone else, just wish you a wonderful evening, a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much again for joining us. Please stay
Bye,
safe
everybody.
and well.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.